Hello, it's Jazz at RedPandaReads, and today I want to talk to you about some of the books that have inspired my Dungeons and Dragons campaigns. Okay, enough posing with books. So, what is Dungeons and Dragons? Dungeons and Dragons is basically a role-playing tabletop game where, as a group, you create a story which is facilitated both by the Dungeon Master, who is the person who creates the world for the story to occur in, and also the roll of a d20. Every decision you make, for example, whether you want to buy a book or whether you want to try and haggle to get something cheaper, or if you're going to try and steal a scepter from a big red dragon, whether you succeed or not depends on what you roll on your d20 and what your skill set is. So, for example, you might decide that you want to haggle the price for a book. You roll poorly, and therefore you kind of talk to the rest of your team members, and one of them might be a rogue and say, you know what? He's being unreasonable about the price. I will sneak in under dark later and try and steal the book. And this kind of happens to create a story. And what's amazing is the story can be anything from, I don't know, the quest to find a fluffy duck and take it back to its mum to, so in my current campaign, where I'm a player, we are having to try and get some dragons to help us fight an army of demons which are trying to take over the whole of Covert, which is a continent which is actually a pre-provided continent in the world of Eberron, which is one of the universes in the official D&D world. And what I love about D&D is you can follow stories that are pre-prepared, or you can make up your own stories, and that's what I tend to do. So I may choose a base of a world, for example, the Eberron universe, or I may just choose a generic fantasy setting. But then I make the outline of my story up and let my players kind of lead me in whatever direction they choose. And it's such a wonderful way of telling a story and making characters. And yeah, I absolutely love playing it. Also note, during lockdown, I went on a bit of a spending spree at some point because I was going a little bit crazy, and I brought this really, really cute dice bag with little red pandas on it from Tabletop Crafter on Etsy, and she makes them all herself, and I'll put the link below, and you can get loads of fantastic different materials. And if you can see, she makes scrunchies as well, and she also does face masks. Would it be too much? Do you think I should get a red panda face mask? Because I'm really considering it. And yeah, you persuaded me. You guys have persuaded me. I'm going to do it. Because you can't have too many red pandas, right? No? Okay. So I want to talk to you today about two books that have inspired some of my Dungeons and Dragons campaigns, because I think they're fantastic books. I haven't talked to them before, and they've created some really fun things within my campaigns. And the first of those I want to talk about is a young adult fantasy book called Sabriel. And I think the main reason it's young adult is because the romance is pretty PG in it, but otherwise I think kind of anyone can really enjoy it, and it's got some pretty scary moments to it because the main fantasy kind of monsters within it are the undead, which are pretty damn creepy. The book follows an 18-year-old woman called Sabriel who's just finished at her college, and she finds out that her father is potentially stuck in the land of the dead. And her father is known as the Abhorsen, so he is the person who basically ensures that the undead are kept in check. So any kind of necromancers that come up and try and raise the undead, he will put the undead back where they belong. And Sabriel, although she's had very little to do with her father her whole life, she has been trained by him in the art of necromancy. And the way that she can control the dead is via the use of ringing bells. And there are 7 bells in total, and some of them summon dead, some of them bind them, others can put them back to where they came. And it's just a really cool way of controlling the dead. And within this book as well, the dead are incredibly creepy. So they're not just kind of zombies going about doing their own business. There are undead that can possess people, taking on their form and jumping from kind of form to form, killing the last form as they move on. There's also undeads which appear kind of more these massive demonic, scary creatures that are also within the book. And it's a really good book. I actually initially struggled with reading it, but I went back to it when I was older, listened to it on audio, and absolutely loved it. And it's a really fun way of doing undead. The Old Kingdom, which is the place where the undead live and where Sabriel has to go to try and find her father, is pretty damn creepy, because within this place there are things known as charter stones, which are basically there to protect people from undead, and those are going wrong. So there's lots of abandoned villages which feel almost apocalyptic within the universe. So my inspiration from this is starkly different from the darkness and creepiness of the undead. My players arrived on an island and they ended up in this gnomish village, and what the gnomish village was famous for was its cows. So they had sorry about that, you fell over. I was probably talking too enthusiastically. But there was hundreds and hundreds of cows, and all these cows had bells on them. And so I decided, as within Sabriel, where the bells, if you made them make a sound, they could do something to the undead, I decided to use the spells from the D&D universe and kind of imbue these, is that the right word? Yeah, imbue the bells with these spells, so that rather than drinking a potion to get a spell effect, you have to ring a bell to get a spell effect. And of course, all the cows have bells, and the spell that I had put on all the cows' bells was fly. So if they would get scared, 100 odd cows would just fly into the air, and it was just quite a fun sight, and that was really good. So I'd really recommend Sabriel as a book. It's given me some fun ideas for D&D, just simply the idea of magical bells, and that's the greatness of, I guess, being inspired by others' work, where you see something they've done, you take it and you make it your own. So the next book I want to talk about, which if you haven't read it and you're a big fantasy fan and you kind of like, I guess, con artists, but in a really cool way, then this book is for you. And this book is The Lies of Lamora by Scott Lynch. This book is set in the city of Camor, which is a fantasy world, which is kind of like a medieval Venice style place. It's got the brutality of, I guess, medieval violence and kind of torture within this beautiful, elegant setting where there's canals all across the city with the contrast of the slums, and then the more bougie part of the town with high sky rises which just look over this whole absolutely mesmerizing city. And it follows a group of thieves which is run by Lamora, and they specialize in conning people to make money. And the book starts where they're starting a new, very complex project to con a wine merchant out of a ton of money. Every time you think, okay, they've conned them in this way in order to get this money, there's another layer to it and another layer, and kind of more bluff and more bribes, and it's just really, really interesting and fantastic book. And you also find out a little bit about the past lives of the gang of thieves. Jean Tanner, who is basically Locke Lamora's kind of Samwise Gamgee, he's quite kind of a strong, tall, broad guy who is kind of the, I guess, muscle of the group, but he's got a very soft heart. And he, when he was younger, gets taught to fight. However, in this world, it's not as simple as you go down to the stables, you find yourself a soldier, you learn to fight. No. In this incredible setting, in this incredible book, Jean Tanner goes up into this massive tower, and he gets to the top, and he steps out of the elevator and appears in this maze made of glass roses, kind of as tall as hedges on all his sides, and he has to make his way through this glass rose maze to the centre to be taught. and every rose has a sharp thorn coming out of it, a glass thorn, and if you prick yourself on it, it will absorb some of your blood, and the colour of your blood, well, your blood will start swirling around within the glass rose. How awesome but macabre is that? Just, this is what's so amazing about the books, just like all these little details and the images, and oh, it's just beautiful. And if you actually read the front of the book, it says it's great for inspiring D&D ideas, and it did in this case. Because what I did is some of my characters ended up in the Feywild, and I created a combat map of a glass rose maze, which the characters had to work their way through and also fight enemies. And not only that, but the roses moved within the maze, so every now and again the whole place would shift, and if the characters, my players, weren't careful, they could get pricked by a rose. And as in the book, the rose would then take the colour of their blood, but I also decided that it would sap some of their strength from them. And so what this meant is when you're fighting, you roll a d20 to see if you hit the enemy, and therefore I said you have to roll with disadvantage, so you roll the dice twice and you have to take the smaller value to see if you hit, with the idea that they've been weakened and some of their kind of energy has been taken from them. And I think that was one of my favourite battle maps. I loved how dynamic it was, I loved the beauty of it, and I hope that my players could kind of see the beauty just as I could see the beauty from that book. So I think that's everything right now. I love Dungeons and Dragons, I love reading, and I love stories, and basically Dungeons and Dragons is a way that you can make stories with your friends, which is fantastic. So thank you very much for watching today. I'm hoping to do some more D&D themed videos soon, and take care and look after yourselves, guys.